Hey everyone, welcome to the Search Engine Journal Show. I'm your humble editor-in-chief, Amanda Zantal-Wiener, filling in for Lauren Baker. And I have the privilege even today of being joined by Yury Pinsky. He is the Director of Product Management for Bard over at Google. Yuri, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Amanda. It's amazing to participate. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you. I love your background, by the way. I love always seeing everybody's little trinkets and belongings and things that they have, in their office setting.
Yeah, thanks. I'm in a user research design studio. It's a space that we bring folks in to kind of explore and improve the product. So I can't
Yeah.
say that this is my personal setup, but it's one that we have here in the office.
Okay, but I like it though because we're getting a peek behind the curtain
Yeah,
of Google Office. That's always exciting.
that's right.
Yeah, I going completely off topic here, but have to make a little bit of small talk. I had lunch at one of the Austin offices a few weeks ago when I was in town for PubCon, and let me tell you, those jackfruit tacos, like y'all know what you're doing. I gotta say.
That sounds amazing. I haven't had the chance to visit the Austin office yet, but I've been to quite a few internationally and in the US, and it's always super fun.
Are you allowed to tell us which one is your favorite? Do you have a favorite Google office?
I'm a big fan of the Zurich office in Switzerland. That one I think is great. I think the Tokyo office is super fun, and then the New York one is interesting. So the New York one occupies a pretty large building, and so to kind of traverse the floor, you'd even ride a scooter sometimes to get from one side of the space to the other, which is like a nice little break in between meetings.
Yeah, you can get your steps in and get your
That's
work done too.
that's right. That's right.
We love a multitask. All right. Well, I will stop chewing your ear off with small talk and jump right in. So, hopefully everybody who's watching knows what Bard is. But do you want to give us your little elevator pitch just to set us off on the right foot?
Yeah, Bard is our creative collaborator. It's a place that you can come in and have a conversation with the large language model, really with the aim of helping you to boost your productivity and bring your ideas to life. I think it's really something. I'm inspired by this idea that technology can work with us and it can help us ideate and like iterate on our ideas. And we're really excited about the promise of Bard.
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely have a few questions. I'm burning questions I want to ask you about how humans and AI can, collaborate and coexist. But I would love to talk a little bit about how you ended up where you are. And so can you tell me a little bit about your journey into your current role and what led you to ultimately land on PMing for Bard?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm a lucky member of the BART product team, but this is after about 16 years at Google, actually. And so I've had a few different chapters and kind of mainly focused on early days consumer products. So I started on the mobile team. I was at Nokia mobile phones in my prior gig. And so I came into Google and we were looking at mobile devices. So phones, tablets. And so what can you do in terms of search capabilities on these new handsets where you have touch, you have swipe, and you have these new kinds of things. And so, what does that mean for reimagining image search or product search or how information is presented and consumed when you can do that? And and so that was a really fun part of the journey. And then I spent a few years in wearables. And so wearables, you have completely different kinds of constraints like battery life and the device may get warm or there's other kind of physical challenges. But it's also an exploration around how can we use technology when we bring it closer to our senses and what might we be able to do there. And so it's always kind of that same story. And from there, I went to the Google Assistant, but the story is the same in terms of how do you take advantage of technology and evolving technology trends to bring it to our users? And that's really what I think a lot of Google is all about. And how can you bring that innovation to light in ways that leave real impact? And so being part of the early Google Assistant team, we were looking at things like speech recognition. And so now we can understand what you're saying, in many cases, and we can have you engage in the home to ask for, music to play or answer a quick question or get some basic things done around the house. And that got me really interested in language understanding and how do we all communicate so well with each other with language, but why is it so challenging for machines, right? And so Google has continued to invest here, and that gets us to language models and more recently to Bard. So that's been kind of my personal journey, kind of being really privileged to join this team now that's super passionate about pushing that technology forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love the throwback to Nokia. And also even just like the earliest days of Google Assistant devices. I don't know if you can spot it, but on top of my refrigerator, I have one of like the first generation Google Home speakers and still use it for parties. It's really great. As the night goes on, people yell at it to change the music more and more. It's lots.
That's amazing. And I'm well trained. I'll never say the hot word. I might just say, "Hey G," and none of your devices will go off. So it'll be okay.
When I'm feeling particularly type A about the music selection, I'll like turn on the voice recognition so that nobody else can control it. But I'm a lovely hostess, I promise. But yes, back to you, Yuri. I think that hearing about your experience working on and building LLMs for Google is a testament to, Google's long held history of using AI to enhance the user experience. And I think that's important to note because a lot of people love to minimize Bard as nothing more than Google's answer to ChatGPT. But obviously, it's a lot more than that. And, based on everything you just said, clearly a natural fit for Google's ecosystem. So, tell me a little bit about where did Bard come from? Like what was the inspiration and what was the newest gap that Google saw in the market that Bard could fill?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Google has always been deeply rooted in computer science and in advancing technology and finding ways to really bring it to life for our users. And so AI and machine learning has been in a core part of Google products for many years, 6 or 7 years now. Google has really been an AI first company. And so if you look at whether it's ranking or recommendation systems, translation, spam and trust and abuse systems, those all benefit daily from machine learning and AI. And really the whole company has kind of pivoted around that. And I saw this firsthand kind of on the speech recognition and language understanding side, but these models have continued to improve. And so BERT was our first kind of big example of transformer-based models. And then you kind of go from there to Lambda and Palm 2, which BART is based on now. And so we saw this opportunity as large language models came to life and generative AI took off for Bard to be that expression of a user's interaction with the model and to help you collaborate, co-create, and enhance your productivity, and to bring it out to our users in this experiment responsibly and thoughtfully, so we can kind of iterate with users at scale. So it's really this just long technology legacy that's kind of gotten us to this place, and we're super privileged to work with researchers across Google DeepMind. It's really fun.
Yeah, I bet I would. I'd love to spend a day in those shoes, or at least as like a fly on the wall. That sounds like it would be fascinating to watch. And, going back to something that you said earlier about this idea of humans and the machines working together. I've seen, you said it yourself, but I've also seen Bard described as a generative AI tool that humans can collaborate with. And I always think that's such an interesting choice of words, because even in my own capacity as editor-in-chief, I try to stress the importance of people being able to work with AI rather than fearing it, fight it, or even letting it do everything for us.
Right.
And so I want to hear, though, what does this collaboration mean to you, especially in this context as someone who has overseen so much of Bard's development?
Yeah, I'm really inspired by this idea that technology can work together with us, and we can we can bring Bard in as a creative partner, like in your editorial work or when we're trying to write a document for work or something in our personal lives. It's hard to get started sometimes. It's hard to start from a blank page, and so you can have a prompt. You can bring immediate ideas in from Bard. It'll generate a few different choices for you, and then you can iterate over that. And whether you're trying to outline some pros and cons, or thinking up a bedtime story for your kids, or creating something for work, it's really this ability to go back and forth and to ask questions and to ask for iteration that I think is really interesting. I think many of us have this jumble of thoughts and ideas in our head, and like to be able to sort of transfer that somewhere and then riff on that with a large language model is really the promise, and something that I think is really exciting. And then we've been pushing on this. And so, more recently, we've announced things like Bard extensions. And so these are now tools that go beyond the capabilities of the model itself. And so we can call out to Google Maps or Google Hotels if you're, engaging in some travel planning ideation, and those can fetch pieces of information for you. Or you can maybe check something out on YouTube, or even pull in content if you choose from your own Gmail or Google Docs. And so, like for example, as a busy parent with young kids, we get lots of emails from school, and I admit I don't always read all of them, but it's nice to get a summary and to find out exactly when I'm supposed to be somewhere, or what's going on. And so it's this editing, synthesis, kind of iteration loop that I think is really powerful in this collaboration model, rather than, maybe some earlier tools where they'll do the job you need, but you have to know exactly what you want to have done, right? And that's not necessarily the creative process most of us live every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, kind of throwing it back to the roots of the idea of this technology as an actual assistant has been probably the most helpful one to me. When you were talking about summarizing the emails from the schools, I'm like, yeah, I feel seen, not in that exact capacity, but I have to read so much news every day, and it's been so helpful just sort of disintegrating down to exactly what I need to know in terms of what to assign to my writers, just what I need to know to talk about in my capacity. And so it's that distilling of information is a really good use case, I think, for technology like this. But I do have to kind of like ask you a little bit of a spicy question, just because I do, we are the search engine journal. And as I'm sure you're aware, uh, no matter how much it's been disputed, there's still like kind of this core concern in the SEO community about the potential impact of generative AI on SEO. And so I have to ask, um, how do you see generative AI and tools like Bard influencing the future of SEO and influencing the future of content creation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's the right question. And just like in the consumer space, I think for the SEO community, or it's important to engage with the technology, and I think it can be really helpful. So I think, if you're like, let me talk about some concrete features maybe of Bard that could be helpful, right? So you have to write a piece of content. So you put in a prompt, and right off the bat, you get 3 drafts, right? So you can kind of get 3 takes on your idea. And maybe some of it you like, some of it you don't. Again, it's a collaborative, iterative process. And so you can kind of riff on that in multiple turns. And then we also have the ability now for you to modify the response, right? So you can ask for something shorter, longer, more casual, more professional. I think these are all ways that members of the community and all of us can benefit from using the technology in this way. And you can take a piece of content you have in Google Docs and kind of ask for a summary of that, right? Because it's it takes time to write that shorter letter, right? I think that's the expression. And so now, this is not an area of my personal expertise, but the search team absolutely has robust policies in this space, right? And so they're looking for that high quality original content, right? I think there's that expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness are the sorts of things that they that is encouraged. And so I think there's a lot of room to use tools like Bard to help you bring forward your ideas and iterate on them and create that content. On the flip side, what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be using AI for the purpose of like gaming rankings or something like that, because that would be a violation of policies. And it's also not, it's not going to bring forward that authoritative, high quality content, because that's not going to be coming from you. And so I would look at generative AI as a piece of the toolkit, as something that you can riff on ideas for. I think it can aid in your productivity. It can make you more efficient for looking up information, kind of synthesizing things, putting together marketing material for different audiences. I think there's a lot of power there, and something that we look forward to your usage from your community and their feedback, so we can improve. So I think used in those ways, it could be quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of digging a little bit deeper, you talked a lot about some of the best use cases for how it's going to aid SEO and content creation and instead of like, ruining it or killing it. But what do you think are some of the other most innovative opportunities you think Bard is going to offer and will offer people in our industry, especially in like a business to business capacity?
Yeah, so we've talked about kind of that iterative writing process and editing. I think just to kind of go in some other directions, these models are also multimodal. So I think there's interesting capabilities at the intersection, going beyond text, at the intersection of text and other mediums. So there could be lots of interesting kind of creative opportunities there. Bard already allows you to upload images. And so you can upload a product mock-up or some marketing collateral, and you can ask for ideas on how you describe it or how you would position it. Or even, if you have a pet, just for fun, you can kind of riff on maybe some fun captions for that image. But I think there's opportunities in exploring different styles, different creative kind of outlets for both text as well as imagery and more mediums down the line that I think are interesting. And then, beyond that, I think there's more like domain specific applications, whether it's education or healthcare, that I think could be very exciting for artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's actually I spoke about this at PubCon. One of my favorite ways, and I can't even take credit for this, one of my colleagues gave me this idea, but I was writing a letter from the editor for a while, and one of my favorite applications of Bard was to put in the text of the letter and ask it, who does it think this was written for and why? And I'm just kind of like, okay, well, this is fun. I think I'm on the right track, because if it's like, okay, if it thought I was writing for lion trainers, then obviously, or lion tamers, haven't spent a lot of time at the circus lately. Like I am like, okay, well, I guess I'm way off. But yeah, so it can sort of help with that very like well-guided and well-informed gut check if you're in that creative capacity. But one thing that I always kind of emphasize to my team is that when technology is so new, it's nebulous. Many of the times it's so nebulous, and it comes with challenges, and I'm sure challenges that you're working with as well. So tell me about some of the challenges that you're working with, especially the ones that might impact users within our audience. So like SEOs, digital marketers, content creators, especially things like the hallucinations. Yuri, I got to ask about the hallucinations. So tell me about some challenges.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about hallucinations. So the model, these models, they hallucinate. That's part of their creativity, and it's actually something that leads to some really interesting results. But hallucinations are not what you want in all sorts of contexts. And so we acknowledge this. We've publicly sort of said that this is a part of the experience, and we're not standing still. So there's there's teams working on this day by day. And just recently, we announced something called the Google It button. So every time you put in the prompt to Bard, there's a response, and then there's this G button at the bottom, and so you can tap on that. And so what that will do is it will it will then mark up sentences, right? And so mark up sentences in green for which we found similar content on the web. Now, it doesn't mean that we're saying that's like truth, but it is something that's corroborated by sources on the web that you can then click through and explore on your own. And then they might highlight some sentences in orange where we're unable to find any evidence, or we found some contradictory information on the web. And really, the way I think about this is meant to help you double check this information, right? So we want we all need to be responsible users of these tools where we're trying to make them better, but it's important that we acknowledge that they're not perfect. And so as part of that responsibility, we're helping our users be able to do things like double check and validate these sources. And so like you'll put in the prompt, and I was doing something with my kids around like whales, and then it's like, oh, whales can, they can swim at this speed, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. But like, you don't want to, so you can click it and you can kind of go through it. And I think it's important that we don't just take everything for granted, right? As we all know.
Yeah.
And so it's an ongoing journey, and we very much BART is an experiment, and we very much welcome our users' feedback. So please thumbs up, please thumbs down, please tell us when something is not correct, so we can learn and make it better. And hallucinations is one domain, but it's the same for various trust and safety efforts and misinformation. These are areas that Google takes incredibly seriously every day.
And it's so polite too, because I was using it for some research once and I was like, wait a minute, you cited this study, but I'm not actually seeing this in that study. Like, can you check again? And it's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm a language model. And I'm just like, but it's so polite about it when it makes a mistake. Okay. I don't know if there's like a simplified way of explaining this, but I'm personally so curious. I think I understand. But for everybody else who's watching, like, where do the hallucinations come from?
Yeah, so the language model, it's a text prediction, right? So it's completing these sentences and it's putting words together in a very fluent and articulate manner. But as it's putting all that information from its pre-training data, it isn't always able to ground all of that information. It isn't always able to verify on the fly that things are correct, right? And so, us humans, we're also guilty of hallucinations on occasion, right? Not everything we say is super rooted in truth, and so this is just the nature of language and the power. Again, the power in what's captured our imagination with these language models is this fluidity of speech and this ability to generate output that's very that's very sensible, and it sounds right. But then if you actually get in there and you start checking everything, it's not entirely perfect yet. So we're working on that.
Yeah. When you're describing it, it reminds me of the proliferation of gossip sometimes. So, like, I'm not proud of this, but I watch a lot of Bravo smut. I watch a lot of Real Housewives. And the way you're describing how the hallucination works, I can't help but think about how rumors get started on these Real Housewives shows. I'm like, oh, well, aren't we all just giant, sentient language models? Although Bard is not sentient. I want to I want to make sure we differentiate that. And to that end, I am curious, what does differentiate Bard? Kind of going back to this whole idea of how people so easily dismiss it as like, oh, it's just Google's answer to Chat GPT. Well, again, we've covered how it's much deeper than that. So what does differentiate Bard in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think first I would say it's like a very vibrant, fast-paced, fast-moving industry right now, which is just very exciting for end users and for the advancement of the technology. You kind of have advancements and breakthroughs constantly from across partners. I think some of the unique things we have with Bard are things like the ability to plug into Google tools, right? So these Bard extensions, this is where you could go beyond the model capability itself, and so you can reference maps in YouTube and hotels and Gmail. I think that's a nice advantage. I think this work we've done deeply with Google Search and Google It button around hallucinations and helping to make for a more informed response, I think is important. And that's sort of part of our deliberate and thoughtful approach to responsibility generally at Google. And I think, for me personally, day to day, I'm just inspired to be part of this amazing team that's bringing a lot of, energy and innovation and this like infectious desire to do better for our users in helping them on their collaborative journeys and give them a little bit of that like superpower by collaborating together with AI. So I
Mhm,
think it's the early days for sure, and all of these things are going to continue to improve.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, the whole idea of it, using it to have a superpower. You've talked a lot about some pretty specific use cases. What are some of the broader applications of not just Bard but generative AI in general that you're hoping to see? Or maybe you've already seen them that folks watching, might not have even considered yet.
Yeah, I think it's if we kind of zoom out. I think so. I think in various like again creative industries, you mentioned watching some TV shows. Maybe a couple years from now, we're watching some TV shows and there's some like quirky plot twist, and maybe we won't find out, but it was the result of that writer's room like riffing with generative AI for a week, thinking through like plot twists and changes in dialogue, etc. And um, I think there might be interesting things like that. Maybe a little bit more, even more importantly, is I think in the sciences and the medical field, there could be lots of interesting breakthroughs in drug discovery and in climate applications. And so I think, we'll see how these things play out. But areas like Google DeepMind are investing deeply in these areas. And how can they use the power of these foundational models and focus them on very specific problems? And then, channel that intelligence together with the brilliant human minds around it to really benefit all of us in some way.
Mhm, mhm. So it's not gonna replace us. I mean, everything you're saying right now is like, I don't see a sign of it, like, being the doom and gloom of like, "Oh, it's gonna outlive and outpace all of us, and, we're just gonna be, peons and or, whatever."
I mean, that's just not at all the lived experience, sort of like day to day, where the benefits of it are the co-creation and the collaborative nature. And I also, I take a fair bit of inspiration also. So I have two younger kids, and I've kind of watched them interact with the various technologies. And again, like all these speakers and displays from Google Assistant came very naturally to them, right? So the just interacting with technology via voice, they just like, well, of course you would do that, right? And
Mhm,
then, and now we get to this thing, and uh, they have no like qualms about like sort of taking a jumble of thoughts and kind of putting it in and helping it shape. Like if we're, I don't know, they're watching this show One Piece lately. It's like an anime with all of these characters, and they have these battles, and like Luffy and Zoro, and I'm not sure who all the other ones are, um, but they're like, oh, let's do a story, and like Sanji is gonna battle Luffy, and then this happens, and then kind of, um, but like the ideas are inherently like theirs. It's just that they're working with AI to shape them and to take them in different directions and spin up variants. And it's like boosting what they're doing.
mhm.
It's not like replacing. So that's kind of the fun part of it, I think.
I love that you talked about how at the end of the day, these are your kids' ideas. If you read books and hear the stories of, very famous showrunners and creators in Hollywood, for instance, a lot of them will talk about how. So Shonda Rhimes, the woman behind Grey's Anatomy and many many other very very successful shows, in her book she writes about how that's kind of she credits a lot of that's just imagination and like story invention, as like kind of the roots of her success as an adult now. And so I like that you talked about that and kind of, it's a serves as a good reminder to me that it's like, okay, well, your ideas still have to be your own in order for AI to work with you best and work for you best. So to that end, I'm dying to know what some of the most interesting prompts are that you've seen.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and there's certainly some like fantastical, really long prompts that we'll see on occasion. But what's most exciting to me are like real prompts from real users in their daily life, right? So we'll see and we'll just kind of see that imagination interaction coming through. So we'll see somebody planning out their like dream vacation, right? And so it's like starts a little like fuzzy, like I've got 8 days, I'm gonna go to Italy and I want to see some, major sites and small villages, and I've got to try some food, and then kind of like turn by turn, it becomes something a little bit more focused, right? So now, okay, here are the directions from Siena, and here are some quirky restaurants I want to check out that maybe like Google Maps is helping me with. And and then there's examples where somebody is trying to start up a business, and they don't like they're like clearly passionate about this idea for this business they want to start, but they don't know how to do all the stuff around it. Like, how do you form the LLC, and like how do you do the paperwork, and like what are the things they need to think about? And so they're using Bard as this like sounding board for their ideas, and they're able to put structure around it and tune it and iterate on it. And I think it's that's those are the sorts of things that we on the team we see, and we take this like sort of Google talks about these like three respects, and one of them is like the respect for the opportunity, and that's the where it stands out for me, is this like respect for the opportunity in front of us, of this technology that's new and early, and we're trying to make it better, but there's like something very interesting there that you can kind of offload your ideas somewhere where and have a buddy and a sidekick on your side to help you kind of work through that. So I think those kinds of prompts, whether it's about document creation or writing code or planning a trip, or and again, those resonate because we all experience them. Like, I was going camping in Pinnacles recently, which is like a campsite nearby, but it's like, okay, like where should we go? How should we pack? What do you need to bring, etc. And kind of, you're not quite even sure where you're going first as a user, but you start working through it, and you have somebody to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the conversational element of these LLMs and the chatbots that we use to interact with them. I think that is a key differentiator, and this introduction to how we find information. And I think that that's part of what has a lot of SEOs kind of like shaken in their boots, because they're like, okay, well, this is what I usually optimize and write my content for. Is it's just kind of like, somebody wants to know how to form an LLC, somebody wants to know what to pack for a camping trip to this particular place, and it's like, oh God, now they're asking this chatbot about it. Like, is this the end of search? So, Yuri, is this the end of search?
It is not the end of search. I certainly don't believe that, generative AI, and nobody at Google or on the Bard thinks about it that way. Bard is an experiment. It's complementary to search. It's this conversational collaborator, and we're working through how to improve the model, how to help users kind of go back and forth. And search itself is experimenting with generative AI to help people in their information journeys, right? But that need for information, it's timeless. The Google's mission, 25 years in, has served us really well. And so I absolutely don't believe that, it's the end of search or anything like that.
Well, that's a relief. I'm glad to hear that. So, all right, it's not the end of search, but I guess a good way to close this out is, what's next then? Like, what's the future vision for Bard and for generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's early innings for sure, right? Like, we're continuing to improve it. I think there's lots more work to come on, like, just improving the capabilities of the model, helping it be better at reasoning and following instructions. More sorts of like tie-ins into various tools. One of the things we announced more recently is the assistant with Bard, right? So you mentioned that you have some of these devices where you around your home, and so those devices, they do certain things for you, right? But they're not necessarily the best conversationalists. But how do we marry those two together and build towards that more powerful assistant, which can do some of those actions on on your mobile phone, as well as be a conversationalist? So I think there's a huge amount of potential in this space, and we're excited to work on it. We are excited to see. I don't know why my lights just turned off. We're excited to see how this goes. That's amazing. Okay, just
Because you haven't moved around enough. It's probably
yeah,
moved. Yeah.
yeah. Let me maybe re-click it and then okay, it
Muzzle
did it. All right, thank you. Um, yeah, and so I think um, it's a huge opportunity ahead of us to continue push these things forward and to build experiences which are more cooperative, that work with us and help us achieve everything we're trying to do. And I very much look forward to hearing how you're using Bard, where it's working, where it can be improved. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Yuri. Right before we sign off, though, was there anything else you wanted to share that I haven't asked you about yet?
Just tremendous thanks to all of our users and the amazing team I work with every day. And we look forward to continue getting your feedback so we can keep improving the experiment and make this the best, place to bring your ideas to life and keep collaborating. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Yuri. Again, we really appreciate the time you took to chat with us today. And we're excited to see what's next. And we'll be keeping an eye on it, and reaching out to say hi and ask you what's next as it continues to evolve. And thank you so much to everybody who is watching. And I want to send a special shout out and thanks to our sponsors, Channable and Claravine. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.